Hello everyone, this brief tutorial is going to be talking about creating and pinning activities in Seesaw. Let's get to it. Now when you go to your Seesaw home screen where you have your class, the first thing that you're going to want to go to is either the Activities tab and you can press Browse Library, or you can just press the Add button and click Assign Activity, and that will also take you to your Activities library. So either way, you want to head to your Activity library. From there, you're going to go over into My Library. Now, if you did want to just search for an activity that's already pre-made, you could also do that in your community by filtering through your grade level and subject, or also in the School or District tab. But for our purposes today, we're going to focus in on creating our own activity, what that looks like, what the time constraints are, and if it's really doable in your class. Now, sometimes creating an activity can feel overwhelming, but I want you to know that creating an activity can be as complex or as simplistic as you'd like for it to be. When you click Create a New Activity, the only thing that's actually required is the activity name. You could save the activity and assign this to students just like this, so where they're basically going to be given a blank canvas for whatever it is that they want to complete in that activity. So maybe this one, for example, is response to reading. And what that means is when a student completes this, they'll have the opportunity to basically, when they hit add response, they're going to basically be choosing which one of these options they want to do. Whether it's maybe they're just taking a video of themselves, recording their response, just as an example to where an activity doesn't have to necessarily be anything super duper complex as far as what you're creating goes. But I think it's important to add instructions and maybe an example as well. But again, it just depends on what you want to do. Let's look at something though that might just take a little bit more time to creating a student template for responses, so that way students have a guide of what they should be doing. I'm going to go ahead and show you two different examples of what a student template for student responses could look like. But obviously this can be applied to any subject depending on what you want students to do. So when you're creating a student template, that's basically the canvas that they're going to be working off of. So my favorite thing to do is when I add a template, I'm going to click on drawing. And what that basically is going to do is going to give you a blank page that this is basically what the students are going to see when they click add response. So now I have an opportunity, for example, to add a title at the top, maybe add different things that students can sort or different math problems. There's tons of different ways that I could go about doing this, and I want to show you just a few. Now, the first type of activity I want you to consider is something I like to call draggable. So basically, if I go into my three dots here and I click on shapes, there's a lot of different opportunities for students to be able to drag something, including base 10 blocks, as well as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, equal sign, as well as different music clefs, and then some other shapes here. But what I mean by this is having students an opportunity to drag something from one spot to another while they're also talking it out in their mind and also recording their voice is a great opportunity. So I'm going to create something that has students dragging different things for their activity. So one example of a draggable activity that I'm creating for math is just called drag the sign. What I'm doing is I'm creating three different equations here that are having a missing sign. And I am going to go ahead and add the signs from my shapes section. I actually put all four signs in just as a bit of a challenge, and students would drag the appropriate sign to the correct activity. Now, one thing I like to make note of for teachers is always make sure that if you can, that you lock anything you don't want students to move so they don't accidentally move something they're not supposed to. So if I click the three dots on anything and I go to lock all, now students won't be able to move this unless they physically go into the settings of that and unlock it, which is unlikely. And I've also gone ahead and I hit the three dots and actually locked the size of these to where students can't change the size of them. That's up to you, but this will allow students to drag something, but it won't allow them to change the size of the sign. As another example here, I'm playing around with the different backgrounds. I created some writing paper as the background, and for example, I could have students just practicing writing their first and last name, but this could really apply to anything where students are actually going to be writing on their touchscreens, such as math problems, written responses, tons of different opportunities here. And remember, this is the student's template that they're going to see. So whatever you do, they are going to see. So if you wanted to give them an example of what you meant, for example, I would practice maybe writing my first name, and then when I press the green check, that template is going to be saved, and that is what students are actually going to see. This is going to be the template that they get to work on, so they'll have an example of what that looks like. Now, even though we've just scratched the surface, a little bit of activities, hopefully this gets you started. The last step that we'll need to do is just adding in their directions. Voice directions and an example are optional, but you can definitely do that as well. But for this, I would highly encourage you also to go into Google and search Seesaw icon shortcuts. What that's going to do is going to give you different text shortcuts that will actually add an icon into your direction. instructions to where it'll be a lot more relatable for younger learners and just anyone that needs a reminder. So I'm going to fast forward through this next clip and just watch closely on how I add in these different text shortcuts to add in icons into my directions. So basically all that I'm going to be doing is as I'm using or creating my instructions, I am hopping back and forth between that tab and just adding in those icons whenever I feel necessary. And then once I have all my instructions ready to go, I'm going to hit save, and then those icons would then appear in my directions as they do here. So that way it's very clear and concise for how the student should go about using that activity. For more information on what it looks like on a student's end, you can check out my video called Seesaw, a student's view, and that's great even to show students on what they can be doing when they're completing an activity, such as recording their voice, as well as writing out the answer to their problem at the same time. Last but not least, just want to show you the process of pinning. I'm in my activities tab right now. If I was to pin, let's say, this activity, and I want this to go up to the top, you can only pin one item at a time, by the way. And I go in and assign that activity that I just created. That activity is going to go below the activity that I just created. Side note, if you want to know more about assigning different things to different folders, check out the video that is pinned to the top right now, and I'll show you why folders are so awesome to use in Seesaw. So I'm going to click assign to one class, and even though this was the most recent one that was assigned, you can see it is below the pinned activity. If I choose to pin this activity, it's going to unpin the other activity and send that back down to where it was before. So while it stinks that you can only pin one activity, this can be nice for you to organize your activities if you've got a bunch of things rolling out that week and you want students' attention to be on one specific activity at that time. That's all there is to using activities and pinning them to the top.